So let's get back. Now central limit theorem, chapter 5. Now central limit theorem only talks about the average of any kind of distribution. So we say if we have a sample x1 to xn that are coming from an independent and identically distributed random variable with mean mu and variance sigma square, then we say the average will approximately follow a normal distribution. That would be this, okay, mu comma sigma square by n. Then using that we convert it into standard normal, and this is the test statistic we get. Okay, now using this, if I multiply n on both numerator and denominator, we are going to get this, and using that we can also calculate the distribution of summation x. Again, this is an approximate distribution, it's not an exact distribution. Okay, but this is what central limit theorem gives us. It says for any kind of distribution we can convert the average of that distribution into a normal distribution. Okay, average, that is what central limit theorem says. But we can use the summation x formula to create normal approximation for binomial, we have seen that before. Okay, for Poisson distribution and gamma distribution, chi-square distribution, almost any distribution we can convert it into a normal distribution. Even negative binomial we can convert. All you have to take care is here we substitute nothing but our mean and variance of that distribution. You can see mean and variance of each distribution. Now this would happen only for certain condition. First of all, our n has to be large, only then we'll use approximation. Okay, we are converting sometimes discrete distribution into continuous, or sometimes continuous into continuous. But what happens is, for alpha being small, gamma distribution is more like a positively skewed distribution. Poisson distribution is always positively skewed distribution, and binomial distribution, when theta is small or theta is very large, or you can say 1 minus theta is small, then it is positive or negatively skewed distribution. Whereas normal is nothing but a symmetric distribution. So we cannot directly assume that a positively skewed distribution is same as a symmetrically skewed symmetric distribution. Therefore, only in certain condition we will convert these distributions into normal distribution. Those conditions, first of all, for binomial, n has to be large and theta has to be significantly large. So that would be n theta greater than 5 as well as n1 minus theta greater than 5. Then we will convert it into normal distribution, because it's very much symmetric in such cases. Binomial distribution becomes more or less symmetric, so we can convert it into normal distribution. For Poisson, lambda greater than or equal to 5 is the case where we convert it into normal. Okay, then for gamma distribution, alpha has to be large. We assume alpha is greater than or equal to 15. Now in practical life, 15 is still a small alpha, but because in our table book we have restrictions of finding probabilities, so therefore about, if you have alpha is let's say about 13, 14, you can still consider that to be large. Okay, so about 13 or more, we assume that we can convert it into a normal distribution. Okay, that is just because of the restrictions that we have in our table book. In chi-square distribution, degree of freedom greater or equal to 25, you can convert it into normal distribution. Whenever you are converting a discrete distribution into continuous distribution, you will be using continuity correction, because what we are going to say is, in a discrete distribution, probability is only at a certain point, right? We have probability x is equals to 0 and probability x is equals to 1 and probability x is equals to 2. Only at one single point. But in continuous distribution, we assume that probability at a single point is 0. We assume that probability is always distributed. That is why we find probability density at a single point. And then when we say probability, we will always take into consideration between a range. Okay. So if you want to find probability using a continuous distribution, you need a range. Whereas whenever you are finding probability in a discrete distribution, it's going to be at a single point. So we assume as we convert this discrete distribution into continuous distribution, we are assuming probability at a single point would be spread across as a range. So probability at x is equals to 2 will spread from 1.5 to 2.5. That would be called as a continuity correction. Okay, so due to continuity, we have to do a correction in the probability values. So we say if they asked us probability at point 2, so for normal distribution, I will convert it into probability x between 1.5 to 2.5. This is our continuity correction. Okay. Similarly, if they ask probability x greater than 2, so I am excluding 2. So I am excluding everything that comes from 2. So greater than 2, and I do not want any value of 2 into consideration. So it will go from greater than 2.5. So we are adding 0.5. Similarly, less than 2, I am excluding all values of 2. So I will be starting from here. So I'll say probability x less than 1.5. Similarly, if you are including probability x greater or equal to 2, so you will include 2. So we'll say probability x greater than 1.5, and lastly probability x less than or equal to 2, include 2, so probability x less than 2.5. This is how we write our continuity correction. So whenever you are converting binomial or Poisson into a normal approximation, then you have to use continuity correction. Okay. Any problem here? Let's see a few sums. Okay, I have directly censored data here. I had just give me 1 second. Okay. Okay, I have not taken question of continuity correction because mostly because okay, here we have used CLT and stuff. That is why I think I have not taken question of this. But remember, when we have x, when we are finding relationship of x bar, distribution of x bar, then we will be taking CLT x bar, and when you are finding approximation, this is how you will be doing it. I have not taken continuity correction question any. Okay, so we'll just move forward. If you have any doubts, you can ask me. Now, sampling and statistical inferences. Now, in this chapter, we don't actually get questions from here. Okay, this is just a supporting chapter. So when we are talking about sampling, we have taken a sample out of a whole population, then we are doing some kind of an inference on it, then we have to figure out what kind of distribution those samples will follow. What does that mean, distributions a sample will follow? The concept is that if I select similar kind of samples again and again, explain shortly about continuity correction. Okay, so same thing, continuity correction, whenever you need to find probability, you would be taking into account plus 0.5 or minus 0.5. So I'll just write down an example and show you. Just give me one. Okay, so let's say that we get a binomial distribution. Say x follows binomial 200 comma 0.1. okay, so this is what we have. Clearly, if we want to find probability here, let's say probability x less than or equal to, I will say 220, probability x greater than 180, probability x let's say equal to 201, something like this. Okay, so if we want to find probabilities like this, first of all, n is large, we'll check n theta. N theta is going to be nothing but 20, and we'll also check n1 minus theta. N1 minus theta 20 into 0.9, 20 into 9, I think 180. So clearly they both are greater than 5. Okay. So I'll say expected value of x is going to be 20, variance of x is going to be n into 1 minus theta into 1 minus theta, theta into 1 minus theta, so it's basically 18. Okay. Now here, if you take this as mu and this as sigma square, you don't have to write these kind of things, but I'm just saying if you are taking this as mu and taking a general distribution, so we'll say summation, actually we can say assume that we have multiple 200, what do we say, if we assume that we have 200, we'll not take this as mu and sigma square, we'll take Bernoulli's distribution. If I assume y follows Bernoulli distribution with parameter as 0.1, then my expected value of y, that would be 0.1, and variance of y, that is going to be theta into 1 minus theta, that becomes 0.09. Okay. This, I'll say summation of y will give me nothing but x, that follows binomial distribution, right? So we can say that this is, let's say, mu and this is sigma square. So therefore our summation of y will follow a normal distribution with n mu comma n sigma square. This is using CLT. Okay. Using CLT, right? This is our form, right? Summation x n mu comma n sigma square. Using that, we get that summation y will follow normal. N was 200, so I will have 20 comma 18, and summation y was also binomial. This is nothing but binomial, 200 comma 0.1. okay, So I can say my binomial distribution is approximately following a normal distribution with expected value and variance of the binomial distribution. You can see here. Okay. So you don't have to show this unless and until they ask you. Okay. So what you would say is you get this, and you don't need to show this. You'll just say using CLT x follows binomial 200 comma 0.1 is same as following normal distribution 20 comma 18. Okay, now we have converted our discrete into continuous distribution. So if you want to find probability, these were nothing but discrete probabilities. Okay, so if we want to find probability, first is probability x less than or equal to 220. You will convert this into probability x less than equal to, so we need to include 220. So 220, values of 220, probabilities of 220 will be spread across 220.5, sorry, 219.5 to 220.5. So if you are including 220 and less than, so you should be starting from here and going in the lower direction. So probability x less than, I will get 220.5. This is what we call it as continuity correction. Okay. Then you will convert it into standard normal. 220.5 minus okay, I made a big mistake. My n is 200, so my values cannot be more than 200. Okay, so I was just trying to write something like 22, 18 and let's say equal to 21. Okay, we cannot have values greater than 200. Okay, so therefore if I am saying 22, I am going from 21.5 to 22.5. okay, so probability less than equal to 22 would be nothing but 22.5. So we'll have 22.5 minus 20 by root of 18, whatever this value is going to be, and then find it from our normal distribution. Same, if you want to calculate probability x greater than 180, sorry, greater than 18, then that would be using continuity correction. You want greater than and you want to exclude 18, right? So this is my 18. My probability is distributed from 17.5 to 18.5. So I want greater than and I want to exclude everything that is 18. So I will start from 18.5 and I'll go further. So this becomes probability x greater than 18.5. Again, continuity correction is going to be your reasoning. Okay, is it understandable? If you want probability x is equals to 21 at a single point, it would be basically probability x between 20.5 to 21.5. okay, so this is how we'll work out continuity correction questions. Then after converting into normal, it becomes very easy. Standard normal and then find probabilities, right? So, next, sampling. So we were talking about distribution. Now see, distribution of sample just means that if I collect multiple samples from same distribution, so let's assume that my population has 100 people. Okay, if my population has 100 people and I'm taking samples of 10 each, okay, so how many samples do you think we are going to get? If I take samples of 10 people each, how many samples do we get? We are going to get 100 C 10 samples. 100 C 10 samples, that means we are considering groups of 10 in each cases. So you can see how many samples we are going to get. Now if I assume I have taken all samples, all possible samples into consideration, that means the first person is included in all possible combinations, then that means these many samples, then I will get slightly different averages each time. I will get slightly different variances each time. So for sample mean and sample variance, this is what we are going to get. Now each of them will be slightly different in each cases. They will be averagely same but slightly different. Okay. So if we take average of each sample, okay, if we have taken all possible samples into consideration, we have calculated their averages and we find expected value of that. That means again take another average of it. That would be equal to the mu of our distribution. Mu of our distribution, mean of our distribution. This will always be true because I have taken all possible samples into consideration. That is why average of that will give me nothing but average of the whole distribution. Similarly, individual mean will be almost equal to mu but slightly more or slightly less than mu. Okay. So how much can it vary? It can vary by this factor, sigma square by n. So my average can be above or below by a factor of sigma square by n. Okay, so it's usually root of that. Okay, so we say standard deviation above or standard deviation below. That is what we usually consider. Okay. So that is what we are trying to figure out here. So using a sample, we can assume what our mean could be and we can figure out how far away we could be from our actual mean. So what we do is we try to figure out, rather than taking so many samples, we prefer to take few samples and using that we try to analyze what our population is going to be. So using one sample or more than one sample, we will try to figure out their mean and their standard deviation, and using that we are trying to figure out what would be nothing but our mean and variance of the whole distribution. So therefore we have to figure out what kind of distribution our x bar is going to make, what kind of distribution of our s square is going to make. So we say for normal distribution, we assume that our s square would be following a chi-square distribution with this particular relationship, where variance of chi-square, you can figure that out and rearrange to get variance of s square would be this. Okay. So we have now expected value of x bar, variance of x bar, expected value of s square, variance of s square, at least for normal distribution. This is true for any distribution. This is true for our sample coming from normal distribution. So using these relationship, we make some distributions. So we have t distributions, we have f distributions. So here we say normal distribution divided, t distribution is nothing but normal, standard normal divided by under root of chi square k by okay, where expected value of t distribution is going to be 0 and variance is going to be k upon k minus 2. We know that as k becomes greater and greater, our tk becomes more and more like a standard normal distribution. So using the relationship this, we create a t distribution. This distribution was only created to replace our sigma with s. Just for replacing this, we have created t distribution. Okay. It is the only purpose of t distribution, to replace our population variance with sample variance, because population variance is most likely going to be unknown value. Okay. Then to compare two population variances, we have F distribution. F distribution, this is how we create our F distribution. Again, just to compare two population variances, we create F distribution. This is important, that reciprocal of F distribution also follows an F distribution, but with the parameters interchanged. Okay. So these are the values that we use in further calculations, from calculating what do we say, confidence interval, and calculating hypothesis testing and stuff. Let's talk about point estimation. Point estimation, we have two types of point estimation. We have method of moment estimate and we have maximum likelihood estimate. Okay. So method of moment estimate, it's easy. We just equate it to the moments. So we say expected value of our x, that is our first moment, must be nothing but first moment of our sample. First moment of our sample is going to be summation x by n. When we have two parameters, we say expected value of x and expected value of x square, we will relate it to two moments of our sample. Now estimate just means that we are trying to approximately find what our value of the parameter might be just by looking at the sample. So we are comparing our population values, population moments with sample moments. Now for two parameters, these are the two different ways. Now both of them will give you two different answers. Then why do we use two different ways if we are getting two different answers? Which one would be correct? Whether method 1 would be correct or method 2 would be correct? Now see, from the method 1, you will get that we are equating variance of x as 1 by n summation x square minus n times x bar square. Okay. Whereas from method 2, we are going to get variance of x is equals to 1 by n minus 1 summation x square minus n times x bar square. Okay, so we have two different methods, but they are going to give us nearly the same answer, and we are trying to estimate things here. That means we are going to find it approximately. So this will also give us an approximate answer, and this will also give us an approximate answer. And our assumption is a sample is a good sample if n is large. And when n is large, n and n minus 1 will not give us a very different value. So if I say 1000, okay, if I say n is 1000, 1 divide something by 1000 and divide something by 1001 will, or you can say 999, not 1001, 999. Divide something by 1000 or divide something by 999 will not give you very different answers. And if you take much larger values of n, then again this difference becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. So in practical life, you can use any one of these because your sample is going to be large. Okay. And that is why when you're studying, when our sample is small, when you're writing the answer in the examination, your samples will be small, 10, 20, 30, such values. At that time, it makes a big difference and your parameter will be different in your answers, and both of those methods would be correct. Both methods would be correct. So if in the question they have given you summation x and summation x square, use method 1. If in the question they have given you x bar and s square, use method 2. It's as simple as that. Okay. Okay, so that becomes our MME. What about our MLE? MLE, we need to always create our likelihood function. We can have 3 types of data. We can have a normal data where every value of the sample is known. We can have censored data where we have n exact values, m values that are between a and b, and p values that are greater than b. In that case, this is how you will make your likelihood function. You will figure out probability between a and b, and you will say I have m such values. Similarly, you will figure out probability greater than b, and you will say we have p such values. Okay, so we will take power of that. We are multiplying that many times the same probability. Then for truncated data, we have to find truncated distribution. I'll talk about that truncated distribution. MLE of uniform distribution. What's the problem in MLE of uniform distribution? I have taken such question. I will be talking about that. Okay, I know what problem you are talking about, but I have taken an example. I will be talking about that. Okay, first let's take into account the censored data and truncated data first. Okay. Censored data. Okay. So in an investigation about the duration of the insurance policy of a certain type, a sample of n policies is studied. All n policies have been initiated at the same time, which is also the time of the start of the investigation. For each policy, the time t in months until the policy expires can be modeled as an exponential random variable with the parameter lambda independently of the times of all other policies. Okay, so we have exponential random variable. Suppose that the investigation is terminated as soon as k policies have expired, where k is a known constant. The observed policy expiry times are denoted by t1 to tk. So we know these k values. Show that the probability that any randomly selected policy is still in force in time of termination of the investigation is this much. So we are saying investigation stops at time after k policies have expired. So we know the time of expiry of the last policy. So any policy that is still in force will have time greater than tk. So therefore, using that concept, we find probability. So we'll say probability t is greater than tk. That would be this, and that gives us nothing but this probability. Okay. So probability any policy would be still in force after the investigation is over is this much. Okay. And they are saying show that the likelihood function of the parameter lambda using information from all n policies is given by this. So we know exact time of termination of k values, but we have no idea about n minus k values. Other than that, they were still in force at time tk. So their termination value is greater than tk. Their termination time is greater than tk. So using that concept, we would say this is nothing but censored data. So for the first k values, we have exact PDF. And for the next n values, we'll say it is nothing but probability t greater than tk raised to n times the same value. Okay. So therefore, this is our for the k values, and this is nothing but for the rest n minus k values. Then for MLE, what we do is we take log of both sides, log on both sides, or you can say log likelihood. Log likelihood will give you something like this. And then we differentiate that log likelihood. We equate it to 0 and we get our MLE. This is our MLE. Okay. And in this question, they are asking us to substitute the values. They are saying we have 20 policies where which is terminated after 5 policies have expired. That means k is equals to 5, n is equals to 20, and they have given us t values of all 5 values. So we have to just calculate the MLE. Second part, suppose instead that the investigation is terminated after a fixed length of time. Now they have changed the investigation. So instead of it ending after k number of policies have expired, now it is ending at a fixed length of time. The number of policies that have expired by time t0 is considered as a random variable denoted by k. Now k is a random variable where we do not know the exact time of termination of the policy. We just know that till t0 k policies had expired. Explain clearly why the distribution of k is a binomial and determine its parameter. That is basically because probability that, first of all, you can say variable is that k in bracket number of successes. Then we have trials or total trials. You can say n total trials. Okay. And out of which probability of success would be probability t is greater than tk, or t0 actually, not tk, actually less than, because we are saying that k is nothing but number of policies that expired before time t0. So probability of k being a policy being a k would be that their time expired before t0. Okay. That you can find from here, right? That would be nothing but 1 minus e raised to minus lambda t0. So therefore you would say that k follows binomial with n comma 1 minus e raised to minus lambda t0. This is our binomial distribution. Okay. This is one way of writing. Okay. that is what they have said here. Okay, K follows binomial distribution. So we explained that we have n independent policies, out of which we are trying to figure out the number of successes where probability of success is given to us. Now likelihood of binomial can be written as, always remember, whenever you have binomial distribution, you have only single value, so there will not be any pi. Binomial only gives you one single value. So our likelihood L of binomial distribution, let's say theta, would always be equal to our NCX theta raised to x 1 minus theta raised to n minus x. This is how your likelihood is going to be. Okay, so you can skip writing NCX, and you can say, skip writing NCX, and you can say this is proportional to nothing but theta raised to x 1 minus theta raised to n minus x. Okay, that is nothing but we have x successes and we have n minus x failures, with probability of success being this and probability of failure being this. So it's just probability raised to possibility, probability raised to possibility. Okay, that is how they have written this. Then take log, differentiate, equate to 0, find lambda, and that is this. Now in this, if they ask you which one is more accurate, so our first method is more accurate because we had exact times of k values. Because we had exact times of k values into consideration, therefore that would be more accurate. Okay, they just ask us to calculate the value. Okay, just substitute and find lambda. So this becomes nothing but our censored data, where we knew exact information about k values, but we did not have any information, we had only partial information about n minus k values. Similarly, for truncated, we will have something like this. So a question: a random variable y has a Poisson distribution with parameter theta, but there is a restriction that 0 counts cannot occur. So for truncated distribution, we are going to create a truncated distribution. The whole distribution will be recreated by taking into consideration only those values that are possible. Here they have said it is following Poisson distribution, but there is a restriction that 0 cannot occur. Okay, so we are going to create a distribution. So we'll say probability y is equals to y must be nothing but probability y, let's say x follows Poisson with parameter theta. So y is following Poisson given y is always greater than 0. Greater than 0, that means I have to remove 0. Okay, so this would be probability of Poisson distribution, that would be nothing but our theta raised to y e raised to minus theta upon y factorial, but also divided by probability y greater than 0. Y greater than 0, that means we are excluding 0. So it is basically 1 minus probability of 0. 1 minus probability of 0 gives you this. So in truncated distribution, the general concept of calculating truncated is that we remove the probability of unknown values. So divide by the distribution, known distribution, or whatever you want to call it, truncated distribution. Okay, that is always the case. So you can see here probability of y given y is equals to y given y is greater than 0. Okay, so probability divided by 1 minus probability of 0. Okay, this is what we get. Okay, just give me 1 minute, I'll be back. After you have created a truncated distribution, then it is like normal likelihood. You will create likelihood with this distribution. So here you have log likelihood. Directly they have created log likelihood. Okay, with this you can see, and then MLE accordingly. So this becomes your MLE. Okay, so that is how truncated distribution works. Then we have CRLB that we calculate. Okay, what is CRLB? It is nothing but Cramer-Rao lower bound estimate for the variance. That is the lowest possible value of the variance according to Cramer-Rao's calculation. Okay, so the formula for that would be this. Using that, we can create an asymptotic distribution of a estimate. Okay, this is one way of calculating the distribution of an estimate. Okay, so it is nothing but double differentiation of log likelihood and take expectation of that. So here they are asking us to find the expression for CRLB of the variance of an unbiased estimator of theta. Okay. So this is the MLE equation that we are getting, but we are not taking into account MLE equation. We are going for our log likelihood, single differentiation of log likelihood. Okay, so we had single differentiation of log likelihood here. All you will have to do is double differentiate it to get your sort of CRLB, expected value of double differentiation. So you'll take double differentiation, this is what we are going to get. Okay, and then take expectation of our y hat. Okay, so you will expectation of this value. Now expectation of theta, we will actually substitute our MLE. Okay, so substitution of theta will just be substitution of MLE, but we assume it to be theta. Okay, we assume it to be the actual value of theta. So there will be no change here, here or here. The only difference that you are going to get is y bar. Expected value of y bar is going to be nothing but expected value of our y that they asked us to calculate. So this is the value that you are going to get. Okay. So we'll substitute that here. Okay. And this becomes nothing but CRLB. So we find double differentiation of log likelihood and then take expectation. So wherever you have the parameter, just write the parameter as it is, because that is what the expectation of the parameter is going to be. Okay, and wherever you have the variable, you will have to find the expected value of that variable. Then few values were given. Okay, and we had to do, I think, what do we say, goodness of fit test. So we'll see that later on. So that is how we use our truncated distribution and find CRLB and stuff, or any kind of distribution, any kind of, what do we say, MLE, and then you can find CRLB. What is the similarity between variance and CRLB? CRLB is the minimum variance in a particular situation when you are trying to find the asymptotic distribution. Variance is a general value of variance, right? CRLB is also a variance is also a variance. And most of the time, for a general type of question where you have not had any censored data or you do not have any truncated data, your variance of your parameter will be same as your CRLB. So that is the ideal case. Okay, that is how you can say that CRLB is a good value to take into consideration. Okay, but you cannot find variance directly when you have censored data or you have truncated data. So in those cases, you are going to take CRLB. That is the difference or similarity between them. Okay. Now a chapter of confidence interval. Okay. Confidence interval, we have 11 different cases in which, minimum, minimize the recording video. Okay, this window is up front. Now I think you are able to see. Okay. Okay, now okay, before this we will see some different kind of questions. I think I have one more type of question. Yes, likelihood question. Now you were talking about uniform distribution. This is the uniform distribution question. Okay, so here we have x1 to xn, a random sample from a uniform distribution on an interval of minus theta to theta, where theta is an unknown positive number. Okay, so here whenever we need to find MLE, now see, if you find your likelihood, you would see that we have literally one single term of theta. Okay, or we do not have any other term of theta here, or third term of, what do we say, parameter. Okay, so that just means that you will not be able to find MLE using our method, because as soon as you differentiate this, if you differentiate this, you will get, this is theta raised to minus n, so I think 1 by 2 theta raised to n minus 1, or you can take 2 raised to n out. This is how you will get your differentiation of this term. Okay, or if you take first log, okay, let's go with our normal method. We'll have log L theta will just be n times minus n times rather log of 2 theta. Okay, now if I differentiate, I will get minus n by 2 theta into 2. Okay, so basically minus n by theta. Now if I equate this to 0, I am going to get theta nothing, right? Because I cannot equate this to 0. So whenever you have only one single value of your parameter, you cannot find MLE using our traditional method. So in that case, you will have to make a, graph out of it. Okay, so graph of 1 by x looks something like this. A graph of 1 by x or 1 by x raised to n, these all look like this. These are all exponential graphs. Okay, you are asking, I have one doubt, how we consider that the second derivation is always negative in MLE. So you have to take two things into consideration. First, the word is maximum, right? We are trying to find maxima of your likelihood estimate. So we calculate likelihood and then we are trying to figure out what would be the maxima of the estimate. And second is, you have studied in 11th standard and 12th standard, maxima. How do you determine whether the value is maxima or minimum? We say double differentiation. Double differentiation of your function with respect to x square, this should be less than 0. Correct? So this is why we always take our double differentiation to be negative for MLE. Okay? Should we move forward? Yeah, you are saying, but we never calculate second difference derivative for MLE. We just say, first of all, we do calculate. Okay, it's not that we do not calculate. It's just logic. If I say something like x by n minus n by summation x, this is what you are getting, minus of this. N is always positive, all values of x are always positive, so therefore this is always going to be negative for any value of x. Correct? So this does not need to be calculated. This is just logic. N is number of terms, always positive. X, whenever we talk about discrete distribution, x values are always positive. So do you think this will be always negative? Similarly, like in Poisson distribution, your second differentiation will give you something like this. This is the value that you get. Squared value is always positive, n is always positive, so clearly this is going to be always negative. So it's not that we do not calculate, it's just we use logic to solve it. Okay, but anyways, even if directly by logic we cannot say it is negative, we'll always write it is negative, and we'll move forward. We'll not actually calculate it. Okay, what happens is we get only one in the single differentiation. When we do our differentiation of likelihood with respect to theta, what happens is we only get one value of theta because we are dealing with only single mode. Okay, so any distribution that we see, we are only seeing unimodal distributions, so that is why we get only one value of theta. Okay, so one value of theta, and that is why for double differentiation we literally have one value to prove that it is going to be less than or greater than or whatever, so less than 0. So what happens is automatically we get double differentiation in such a way that for all values of theta we are going to get that as less than 0. Okay, that is the reason we don't need to check. Okay, but that does not mean that we are not checking. We are just saying that we have checked it. Okay, now see, so whenever we have such cases where we have only one parameter, we do not have multiple written parameters in our likelihood, then we will be treating it as a graph. Okay, so this is the graph. As theta becomes higher and higher and higher, the value of likelihood will become smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So just by looking at this graph, you can say that our maximum likelihood would come at this point. That is going to be when theta is minimum. So MLE when theta is minimum. So you have to figure out when would theta would be minimum. For what value of theta your theta is minimum. So we go back to our distribution, uniform distribution. We say that x is between minus theta and theta. Okay. So you have to figure out the different values of x. They should lie between these two values. Correct. So these are the different values of x. Okay. So the maximum value of x and minimum value of x, we have minus 0.92, this is the minimum value, and maximum value seems to be 0.87. Okay, these are the samples given. This is our value that we have seen. So if I want to figure out clearly my values of x, this and this cannot be beyond these values. So clearly my minus theta and theta lie beyond these values. So if I want to find the minimum value, I will say the minimum value that I can reach for theta is going to be the maximum value of x, or you can say maximum value of mod of x. So you can say minimum value of theta would be equal to max value of mod of x. Okay. And that is going to be 0.92. So minimum value of theta is 0.92. So MLE is going to be 0.92. Okay. So this is how we solve these kind of sums where we have only one term of parameter. Now let's move on to confidence interval. The confidence interval, we have 11 different cases. We have single sample from normal distribution with sigma known, variance known, variance unknown. We have variance of confidence interval of variance. Okay, so first we'll see these three, then we'll move forward. Okay, so when variance is known and we are finding confidence interval of mean, then our test statistic is going to be z test statistic. This is called as z test statistic. Okay, because z is used for standard normal distribution. So our confidence interval is this. I'm expecting you all to know these values. I'm not expecting them again to ask you how do we create confidence interval, but you should know how do we create confidence interval, because they will give you some kind of relationship and you will have to figure out how to create confidence interval. So how do we do that? We say probability of our test statistic. Okay, let's assume I'm talking about some distribution z, or let's say w, whatever distribution this is. So we'll say w if I'm talking about double-sided distribution. So at probability 1 minus alpha by 2 will be less than my test statistic less than w at alpha by 2. Okay. Then whatever your test statistics might be, let's assume it is 2 lambda x, something like this. So I would say this would be equal to 1 minus alpha. Okay, probability. So my test statistic I will rearrange to get, let's say, lambda value. Okay, so let's assume 2 lambda x bar just for the sake of writing. So I say I want to find lambda, so I will have test statistic, I will substitute it here and I will get lambda would be between this w 1 minus alpha by 2 by 2x bar and w alpha by 2 by 2x bar. So this becomes nothing but my confidence interval. I'll have to rearrange it. Okay, this probability I will get from whatever distribution it is. Okay, if this is, let's say, chi square 2 alpha, something like this, then actually this becomes actually chi square 2n alpha. Okay, and all you have to do is substitute the value of chi square 2n alpha and probabilities from your tables here. Okay, that is how we create our confidence interval. So these are our formulas. I am not going to go too much into it because these are the easiest question you might get. That would be confidence interval. Just have to figure out which kind of distribution it is, and then you have to just use your formula. Okay. Then we have confidence interval, difference in mean when we have two samples from two normal distribution. Two samples, normal distribution where sigma 1 and sigma 2 is unknown, variance unknown. Okay, this becomes our confidence interval. And we have paired data. So whenever we have two samples, you just have to take care whether they come from two different normal distributions or whether they are nothing but paired data. So this is something you have to take care of. So for that, you have to look for something like, if they say x and y come from similar type of whatever. So I remember a question where they use the term water damage. Okay, so they say water damaged house. There were two assessors who were assessing those water damage. So they say both assessors try to assess similar kind of water damaged house. So the term similar says that they are coming from two different normal distribution. Whereas if they say that we are talking about exactly the same values at different times, like we are trying to collect data from people, let's say, their weight before exercise and weight after exercise. Let's say we have 2 weeks of specific exercise to reduce weight. So we'll collect data from people who attended that seminar before exercise and after exercise. Now what happens is we are collecting data of the same people before and after. At that time it becomes nothing but paired data. It becomes paired data. So you have to take care of that, whether two samples are coming from two different distributions or whether they are coming as paired data. Then we have ratio of variances. Now whenever we talk about our F distribution or ratio or variances, we never get upper bound and lower bound, but just for the sake of sake of writing it, I have written both those values. Okay, just sake of considering them. So you just have to remember these formulas. Most of the time, 99% of the time, the confidence interval question is double bound or both sided confidence interval. Okay, but sometimes they do ask us upper bound or lower bound. Okay. Single sample from binomial distribution, we convert it into normal distribution. Okay, but we want conversion of x bar, not x. So if you want to remember this, then it's good enough. If you want to calculate it in the examination, remember our x is following binomial n comma theta. Then you can convert x into normal distribution n theta comma n theta into 1 minus theta. But then x bar is going to be this divided by n. Okay, so x bar will follow normal distribution with theta comma, you will have theta into 1 minus theta by n. So this is what is converting into this statistic. Okay, where our theta hat is nothing but x by n. X bar is also x by n, because from binomial distribution we get only one single value. We do not get multiple values from binomial distribution, because binomial distribution already consists of n trials. Single sample from Poisson distribution, even here you will get one single value. Okay, it's an average value that you are going to get. So x bar, our lambda hat is directly x bar. Again, your Poisson distribution, x bar will follow nothing but normal distribution with mean comma variance by n. Okay, then you may have two distributions from binomial. Okay, so we are looking for again proportion theta 1 minus theta 2, and we can have two distributions. I have written binomial, this should be Poisson. Okay, ratio of this. Okay, so again confidence interval. For confidence interval, you do not have to write a lot of things. Just write the answer in two terms. Most likely the previous question, somewhere we had confidence interval. We have confidence interval here. No, I don't think they have given us question of confidence interval. Let me just see. Obtain CRLB. Okay, they did not ask us to calculate confidence interval. Usually when they ask us to calculate CRLB, then they ask us to calculate confidence interval as well. Okay, so you can use an asymptotic distribution like theta hat follows normal distribution with theta comma CRLB, and then your confidence interval here is going to be your variable plus minus z alpha by 2 and then root of variance, so root CRLB. This is going to be how you would get your confidence interval. Okay, now here in this question we have two different samples. Okay, a study was conducted to investigate the length of stay in days of short-term stay patient in a particular hospital. Independent random sample of 40 male patients and 35 female patients were selected, and the length of the stay of their patients are given in the following table. Now clearly 40 male and 35 female, this cannot be paired data. Paired data must have exact same number in x as well as in y, and clearly this is not coming into the same values. Okay, so they're saying the male observation are assumed to be normally distributed with this and that, whatever. Suppose it is known that sigma 1 and sigma 2 is given to us. Construct a 95% confidence interval. So here mean is known, variance is known. Known variance to sample from normal distribution. This is going to be our confidence interval. Okay, this is unknown variance. This is known variance. Known variance, this is going to be our confidence interval. So see here 95% confidence interval for M1, M2. See, I have specified here mu I have taken as M, sigma I have taken as Q. Okay. And here I have written the formula of confidence interval. Okay. And you need not even show this mid value. You can directly write this answer. Confidence interval is one of the easiest ones. You just have to specify the formula and directly write the answer. So there is a good chance they will give you MCQs or maybe objective type of question where they will directly ask you to write down the answer without any formula of confidence interval. Then for part B, comment briefly on the implications of this confidence interval. Okay. So just as confidence interval includes 0 because one is negative, the other is positive value, then there is a good chance that there is a fair possibility that the male and the female have the same expected length of stay, because we are talking about length of stay. That means our mu1 minus mu2 might be actually 0. Then in the second one, suppose now sigma 1 and sigma 2 are unknown. Perform 2 sample t-test. So whenever sigma 1, sigma 2 is unknown, then we have to take into consideration what do we say, pooled variance, SP, pooled variance. And then instead of variances, we replace it with pooled variance. Instead of normal distribution, it becomes our t distribution. So calculated the pooled variance. Okay, second part was hypothesis testing. Okay, perform 2 sample t-tests. So they are talking about hypothesis testing. Okay, so here specified the hypothesis, written the test statistic, taken the test statistic, and then directly find the p-value. I would always suggest that using a hypothesis test, whenever you're using hypothesis testing, just find the p-value, and you don't even have to give the exact p-value. You just need to write the range in which that p-value occurs. I found that using p-value, it would always be easier to at least write the answers here. Okay, and finding is also easy. Okay. All the other parts are just hypothesis testing, so we'll do it after a few minutes. So for hypothesis testing, we have all the same 11 cases. Okay, all the same 11 cases where our hypothesis, let's say in this first case, we have mu is equals to some value mu naught. Then an alternative, we can have 3 different hypotheses. We can have not equal to, we can have greater than, or we can have less than. That is determined by the question. If they are asking us to compare whether it is less than a particular value, whether it is greater than a particular value, then we have greater than or less than as our alternative hypothesis. Even though we are trying to prove it is less than or greater than, our null hypothesis will always be equal to. Okay, so our null hypothesis will always be equal to in each cases, and our alternative may be not equal to, greater than, or less than. Okay, so what happens is you just calculate the test statistic and then find the p-value. Okay, this is your test statistic. In z-test, this is your z-test statistic. I have taken it as z observed. and then just find the p-value. And if you find the p-value correctly, in the case of equal to, in case of greater than, in case of less than, okay, I've just written the formula. If you calculate the p-value correctly, then you would find that you just need to compare p-value to alpha, and rather than always comparing it to alpha is equals to 5%, that is not practically accurate. We should not assume that 5% is the default value for which we should compare. We always say that 5% is neither large enough nor small enough to compare, to accept or reject H0. Okay, so we say that if p-value is greater than 10%, if it is greater than 10%, then accept H0, and if p-value is less than 1%, then reject H0. Okay, this is the perfect comparison to take into consideration. If it is between 10% and 1%, then either the question will give you compare it with 10%, compare it with 5%, or compare it with 1%, or you can say that at 10% we are rejecting H0 and at 1% we are accepting H0. Okay, but whenever you are writing a conclusion, you never use the word accept. We say either we have sufficient evidence to reject H0 or we have insufficient evidence to reject H0. We never use the word accepting H0, because technically we never accept an hypothesis. We are always trying to reject it, because our assumption is that we'll not be getting this what do we say, we will never be accepting an hypothesis just by looking at one sample. Okay, so we should never look at one single sample and assume that our hypothesis is going to be accepted. Okay. Now I will be emailing you this formula sheet and the question samples that I have taken. The problem is that I have not completed this formula sheet yet, because I was doing it last night and it takes a long time to make this formula sheet. So I have just done up till hypothesis testing. If I complete it by the third day, then I will definitely be sharing this. I will be emailing you these formula sheets and the questions. I'll definitely be sharing the questions. Okay, the questions that I have taken into consideration, and most likely this as well. Okay. So that is why I prefer always using p-value rather than the other method, that is finding z alpha by 2 and then comparing whether it is between minus z alpha by 2 and z alpha by 2. Especially because what happens is many times they do not give us what is our alpha. Okay, so people consider an default value as 5%. That is not accurate in terms of practical application. So in practical application, we never consider alpha as 5%, because it is not small enough and it is not large enough. Small enough, not even small enough to reject our H0, and it is not large enough to accept our H0. Okay, so we should not compare it with 5%. This is the range that you would consider to accept or reject your H0, at least in practical life. Okay, so same, I will be most likely sharing how much ever I in case of single sample left tail test, how should we write conclusion? Please explain. See, left tailed test, first of all, never use the word left and right. That does not make sense. Upper bound or lower bound. Okay, so I am expecting you are saying lower bound. In lower bound, you are comparing for mu less than mu naught. Okay, then you will take into account the p-value for that. Okay, So p value for that is going to be this. How to compare? Just find the p value. P value, if you get 10% or more than 10%, then you accept your h naught. That means mu is equal to mu naught. If it is less than 1%, then this is correct. Okay, so you would say we have sufficient evidence to reject h naught, hence mu is less than mu naught. That is why I'm saying p value, if you calculate p value correctly, you don't have to worry about comparison. You just have to compare it whether it is greater than 10% or whether it is less than 1%. Okay, so the concept of creating p value is such that let's say give you I know statistics, but the person who is applying my knowledge that I have created in my hypothesis does not understand statistics, so does not understand at what percent should he just knows that p value, if it is large, then it is good for us. If p value is small, then it is bad for us. That is all they understand. Okay, so when I say I am trying to figure out whether they are equal, mu is equal to this value or mu is less than this value, so the person understands that if p value is large, then this is correct. If p value is small, then this is correct. Okay, so that is why the p value is given. And what happens is p value, you know that if p value is coming out to be 40% and 50%, then there is very little chance that your hypothesis is wrong, because p value is very large, so just by looking at 40-50%. Whereas p value, if it is let's say 11%, it is still acceptable, but you know that there is a chance that if you take another sample, you might get a p value that is less than 10%. So it's borderline. So if I'm using it for medical purposes, I would not use such an hypothesis which is so close to rejection region. Okay, I would want my p value to be very large. Okay, so where I need more accuracy, I would like more p value. Where I do not need much accuracy, is just, let's say I'm saying that how much my plastic is polluted. So I may have two grades of plastic. One would be edible grade and the other would be for non-edible purposes. So clearly non-edible purposes can have more impurities, that is okay, but edible grade plastic should always have minimum amount of this impurities, right? So that is why, depending on your situation, you would prefer a level of hypothesis acceptance. Okay, so if for you want very high accuracy, you would say I will not even accept 11% accuracy or 11% p value. I would want p value greater than 20% or p value greater than 40%. Okay, so all I have to look at the p value. I do not need the test statistic. I do not need to know how to calculate probabilities using test statistic or how to calculate the t alpha by 2, where alpha I am taking something else. Correct. All I need to know is what is the value of p. Okay, p value irrespective of alpha. Yes, that is what I am saying. Irrespective of alpha, just by looking at p value, you can say whether it is very accurate or whether it is not very accurate, right? Your conclusion of hypothesis. So that is the point here. That is why in practical life also, they do not give you, t alpha by 2 and then compare it to that alpha or compare it to that. No, that is not how it works. They just give you p value. You calculate p value. So let's study that ways as we would do it in practical life. So that is why I'm saying just calculate the p values and give the conclusion. Even if they ask p-value or if they do not ask p-value, you can always take p-value and answer it. Okay. Then in our hypothesis testing, we have these. I think I skipped biasness and stuff that comes in again estimation chapter. Okay, we'll take that tomorrow. Okay, biasness, MSE, all of that comes in what do we say? Point estimation, right? This sampling, point estimation, yeah, unbiasedness and MSE. We'll see some sums of these tomorrow. Okay, so we'll continue these, and if you have any doubts in a specific question, one thing you can do is WhatsApp me beforehand. You can do that. Okay, I will be taking that into consideration, and we can solve it, or like we did today, that you keep it ready and you present it. I think WhatsApp would be easier. In the email, the number that was given to you for contacting if there is any problem, okay, Pranay sir, that is me, so you can email WhatsApp me on that number. So we'll take those questions into consideration. We'll solve those questions as well. Okay. Okay. So let's end our class here, and these lectures will be uploaded to SMonk Actuarial. No, SMonk Official. Sorry, our YouTube channel is SMonk Official. So in YouTube, just search SMonk Official and you will get the first link as our channel. That would be, you can see the logo, and you'll find these lectures. If you want to refer it later on, will be uploaded there. Okay, so let's meet tomorrow and we'll continue. Okay, bye.